My nephew got drunk at a family dinner and called me the sad uncle who buys love in front of everyone, and they all laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I sat there, staring at my plate, as something inside me snapped, not just from the words, but from years of being their ATM while they smirked behind my back. What I did next turned their world upside down, but was it too far? It was the kind of evening after which everything changes, even if no one realizes it in the moment. Last night, Cody got to feel untouchable. I'd been dreading it all day, another family dinner at my brother's house. Cheap wine, bad food, fake smiles. I went anyway because I always did. That's who I was in the family, the dependable one, the one who helped with bills when they were behind, the one who paid for Cody's phone, car insurance, and his first apartment just so he could say he was on his own. I pulled up, already in a foul mood, not because of anything specific but because I knew how it would go. I'd make conversation, but no one listened to me. I'd bring a good bottle of wine and watch them treat it like boxed red. I'd listen to my brother talk about how hard it was raising a teenager, and his wife make subtle comments about how some people don't understand what real responsibility looks like. They never said it directly, but it was always there, that I had money but no family, that I was the uncle with time and cash to spare, and maybe that made me less than them. Cody was already drinking when I arrived. 18, but no one cared. He'd always been allowed to do whatever he wanted. They called it trusting him, I called it enabling. Dinner was as lifeless as I expected. The lasagna was dry, and the conversation was even worse. Cody got louder with each glass, telling stories that didn't have endings and laughing at his jokes. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever had. Then came the moment. He raised his glass and said it like he was delivering some grand truth, like he was doing everyone a favor by finally putting it out there, to Uncle Larry, the sad uncle who buys love. It didn't even sting right away. What hit first was the silence after, before the laughter, like they were all waiting to see if it was okay to laugh. Then they did, all of them. My brother, his wife, and even my sister, shaking their heads like it was all in good fun. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at my plate, but inside, I was done with all of it. I drove home feeling like a fool for the money I'd spent, the birthdays I'd shown up for, the emergencies I'd covered. It wasn't generosity anymore, it was a joke. I was a joke. By the time I parked in my driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Cody's phone? Cancelled. Insurance? Gone. Rent? Not another cent. Let his friends drive him around now. Let him sleep on someone else's couch. Let him feel what life's like when you burn the one bridge that mattered. He tried reaching out on Sunday from someone else's phone. No apology, just a "can we talk?" I didn't answer. Monday morning, my brother called, and that's when it started, because he didn't call to fix anything. He called to remind me of my place. "So, you canceled everything?" he said, like I'd shut off the heat in the middle of winter instead of cutting a grown man loose. I told him yes, calmly, no drama, no explanation. Just yes. He let out a sigh, this dramatic, annoyed sound, like I had created the mess. "Jesus, Ari, don't you think you're being a little petty?" he said. I didn't answer. I wasn't going to justify it. Then he said something that finally peeled back everything polite between us. "You act like you're some kind of martyr because you throw money around like it makes you better than the rest of us, but at the end of the day, you're still the guy who spends Christmas alone. So don't pretend helping out makes you some kind of hero. You've just been buying your way into this family since the day Cody was born." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit there. I'd spent the last decade covering for him. He lost his job in 2017, I covered his mortgage for 4 months. When Cody needed braces, I chipped in half. When they wanted to surprise Cody with a car for his 17th birthday, guess who was asked to just co-sign? Nothing major. All that time, I thought I was helping. Turns out, they thought I was trying to buy relevance. I told him I was done. He said, "Done with what?" I said, "With acting like this is normal." Then I reminded him of the rental house, a 2-unit property upstate we bought together 10 years ago. A small inheritance from our mother had gone into it. I put up most of the money, but it was supposed to be a joint thing. He'd handle maintenance, I'd handle the books. And for years, he'd quietly pocketed half the rental income like clockwork. I told him I was taking full ownership. I had a lawyer draw up paperwork over the weekend, buyout offer, notarized, fair price. I told him he could sign or contest it, but either way, it was happening. I wasn't going to keep funding people who turned me into a punchline at dinner. He laughed, like it was a bluff. "You're going to cut your brother out of the only decent investment he has?" "Yes." His voice dropped. I could hear the shift from arrogance to panic, but before he could finish whatever excuse was coming next, his wife got on the phone. She didn't ease into it either, just jumped straight into a monologue like she'd been rehearsing it for years. She said I was cruel, that I was embarrassing a teenager who looked up to me, that no one in the family ever said I had to give money, and that if I chose to, then it was on me. That I was doing all this not because of what Cody said, but because I was lonely and bitter and couldn't stand seeing a family that loved each other. She kept going. She said I was vindictive, that I had no kids of my own, so I was trying to play parent when it suited me and pull out when it didn't. That if I walked away from them, I'd eventually have no one. I listened to every word. Then I said, "You're right. I won't have anyone, but at least I won't be lied to, used, and laughed at by the people I kept afloat." And I hung up. The next day, Cody was officially moved out of his apartment. I'd given the landlord notice, no screaming, no drama, just quiet paperwork. By Friday, he was living back with his parents in the room he grew up in. No car, no phone, no rent money, just a mattress, a second-hand laptop, and a pair of parents who were now suddenly looking at their lives and realizing how many strings I'd been holding up without them noticing. But this wasn't over yet. The real unraveling hadn't even started. By the end of the week, the silence from my brother's house said more than any phone call. I knew they were scrambling. Cody was back under their roof, and from what I heard through the grapevine, mostly my sister, who was still pretending to be neutral, he wasn't handling it well. He'd been bragging just 2 weeks ago that he'd never live with his parents again. Independence, adulthood, freedom. Now he was sharing a wall with their laundry room, getting sided every time he opened the fridge. I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. What I didn't expect was how fast the next domino fell. Saturday morning, I got a call from the property manager of our upstate rental, the one I was taking full control of. She said my brother had called her directly, tried to convince her not to make any changes, told her he was still co-owner and that she needed to ignore anything I sent over until he sorted things out legally. So I sent him a message, just one sentence: "Any further interference, and I'll initiate a formal legal dispute." He didn't respond. That afternoon, his wife called. This time, she wasn't yelling. She was calm, calculated. She said, "Look, Ari, I think we all got a little carried away. Let's not burn the whole bridge over a joke." A joke. That word again. I asked her if she understood what I was doing, that this wasn't about a joke. It was about the fact that they never once took responsibility for any of it, that I had carried more of their load than they ever admitted, and the first time I said no, they acted like I declared war. She said, "He's your nephew, Ari. Don't you want to see him succeed?" I said, "Not if I'm the only reason he ever will." That's when she started to cry. Real or not, I didn't care. The money from the property meant something different to them than it did to me. To me, it was passive income, a long-term play. But to them, it had become a lifeline. They had budgeted around it, planned vacations with it, and covered unexpected expenses with it. And now it was going away. Monday morning, my lawyer sent the final paperwork: buyout complete, name transfer filed, a full separation. No more shared investments, no more shared anything. I expected more resistance, threats, accusations, maybe even another attempt at guilt. But they went quiet for a few days. It almost felt like peace. Then my sister sent me a message. It was a screenshot, a group text between Cody and a few of his friends. One of them had written, "Damn, you living with your parents again?" Another said, "Bro went from solo pad to sharing a bathroom with his mom." Lamau. Cody didn't respond. I stared at that screenshot for a while, not because I felt bad for him, but because I knew this was only the beginning. That kid was going to learn what the rest of the world already knew: you don't mock the hand that's feeding you, especially when the hand finally closes. By the second week, it became clear just how tightly everything had been held together with tape. My brother had always moved like a man who thought he was solid, like things would always fall into place eventually because they always had, because someone, usually me, would make sure they did. But without that safety net, reality started peeling back in layers. I went to my niece's birthday party, not because I wanted to but because my sister begged me to come, said it would mean a lot. I didn't expect my brother to say anything. I didn't expect Cody to show his face. But both of them were there. Cody barely looked at anyone. He was quieter than I'd ever seen him, not humbled, exactly, just stalled out, like someone who'd run out of clever lines and didn't know how to be a real person. He stood by the drink cooler, scrolling through a scratched-up prepaid phone, one of the burner phones you buy at a gas station. I almost laughed. This was the same kid who used to complain about not getting the newest iPhone every September. His friends didn't come. Not one of them. Word had gotten around that he was back at home, and in that age group, that's social death. They made fun of him in private group chats and voice memos. I didn't need to see it, I already knew. But what caught my attention more than anything was how my brother and his wife acted toward each other. There was a coldness there I hadn't seen before. She stayed on the opposite side of him in the yard from him most of the time. When he did approach her to ask something, where the napkins were, if she'd seen their younger kid's shoes, she spoke, answered without looking at him, her voice flat, like someone clocking out early from a job they no longer cared about. The fake smiles were gone. All that their tight, performative, cheerleader-like family cheer they used to put on in front of guests? Gone. You could feel the weight in that backyard. It was the sound of things unraveling quietly behind smiles that didn't stretch far enough. I got home that night to a message from my brother. 2 words: "You win." I stared at it for a while. It didn't feel like a victory, it felt like a late admission that he finally realized this had never been wasn't about a joke or a teenager being dumb. This was about years of dependency dressed up as kinship, years of being told I was part of the family only as long as needed there was funding. A few hours later, he followed up with something longer: we can't keep up with the mortgage without the rental income. You know that? I didn't reply because, no, I didn't know that. I didn't care if they knew that. I didn't know that one single rental property, one that check was every month, was the difference between their survival and their panic, and frankly, it wasn't my problem anymore. My sister called the next day. She told me my brother's wife was furious all the time now, that the tension in their house was thick enough to cut through. She said that Cody's situation was making it worse, that he'd applied for jobs but couldn't even get a call back from the local sandwich shop. No car, no degree, no car, no real or work history, and with a reputation for being lazy, he's lazy. He was not exactly a hot prospect. He started sleeping in, staying up all night, and getting into fights with his mom over chores. At one point, he tried blaming her for everything. Everything. She threw a mug, it didn't hit him, but it shattered, and she didn't bother to clean it up. That was their house now, silence, and blame with broken glass. Cody had gone from being the smug kid with his apartment and his car, with his curated Instagram lifestyle, to just another adult child living in his parents' house, hiding behind a closed door. And they couldn't say anything to my sister anymore. They had nothing left to say because I hadn't even cut them off. They burned that bridge with both hands. I thought they'd stay quiet after that. I figured they'd sulk, maybe cut me off socially, let their pride keep them in check. But a week later, I was blindsided in the most pathetic way possible. I got served, not by a lawyer, but by Cody himself. He showed up at my doorstep in a hoodie and sunglasses, holding a manila envelope. I hadn't seen him in person since that dinner. He looked thinner, or maybe just deflated, like someone who had lost something invisible. He handed it to me without saying a word. Inside was a typed letter, not legal, not official, just a printout of a message he'd written, 4 pages long. It was titled, "A Formal Affair Request for Support, No Joke." He'd dead serious language, outlined dead serious language how unknowingly I had placed him in emotional distress and financial distress by abruptly severing support systems that he had claimed had become these foundational to his stability. He had mentioned developmental damage, and abandonment by a paternal figure, and said that if I didn't resume financial assistance, he'd have no choice but to pursue other avenues. At first, I thought it might be a prank or a poorly executed legal threat. Then I flipped to the last page. It had my brother's name on it, too. They'd both signed it together. I laughed, not a bitter laugh, but a genuine laugh, one of disbelief. They were trying to turn this into some kind of moral trial, like I owed them a defense, like being the only one who ever wrote checks meant I was now legally required to keep doing it. I didn't respond, but I did do something else that week. I made a quiet call to the HOA board where my brother lived. I'd helped one of their members out a few years back, alone during a tough divorce. He remembered. I asked if their house was technically in good standing. Turns out, it wasn't. They were behind on dues, not massively, but enough to trigger warning letters. At the next board meeting, I attended quietly. I didn't speak, I just sat in the back and listened while they discussed how unpaid dues were brought up. I never said a word to my brother about it. I didn't need to. By Friday, he'd lost it. He showed up at my place, no Cody this time, just him, his face red, not angry but panicked. He started yelling in my yard, the driveway, shouting that I was going too far, or that this was just family stuff, that you don't destroy your blood over a few mistakes. I didn't say anything until he stopped shouting. Then I asked him one question: when did you decide that my helping you meant you owned me? He didn't answer. He just stood there shaking his head like he didn't know how we got here, and here. Maybe he didn't. After he stormed out of my driveway, things went eerily quiet. No more texts, no calls, no emails, passive-aggressive messages through my sister. For the first time in years, there was nothing left tying me to their drama, and it should have felt peaceful. But something about it felt unfinished, like I was waiting for a punchline that hadn't landed yet. A month later, passed. I then was out one night at a bar with a college friend, catching friend up, from talking college, about catching nothing up important, talking when about he nothing asked if important, I when was he still asked involved me with that about my real estate side hustle, the upstate rentals. Full. Nobody jokes anymore, nobody laughs too loud, and every time I see them now, I wonder if they ever remember time how I had see all them changed, over now, one dinner, one sentence, I wonder, the do night they the remember sad uncle how stopped at buying all love, changed, over because one they dinner, finally made one him sentence, feel the it, night into that sad was uncle the stopped last gift buying I ever gave them.